Understeer is a petrolhead's bad dream, but nearly all factory automobiles understeer at the very limit. It is the safer way for inexperienced drivers, and it doesn't matter whether it has a front, rear, or all-wheel drive. But there is a brand that gets mentioned a bit more often when it comes to the understeer, and that's Audi. Why are their cars known for understeer and others not so much? To answer this question, we need to look deep into physics. In an ideal world, it is preferable to have as much of the weight between the axles as possible, or at least closer to the center. Mass centralization is key, and especially racing motorcycle manufacturers know this term very well. Naturally, each axle requires a certain load in order to provide the desired grip, but too much can ruin other aspects. Over 100 years ago, Audi was born, but let's take a look at where this story roughly started. In 1968, an Audi 100 was launched, and based on a Volkswagen C1 platform with a couple of 4-cylinders. The engine was longitudinally mounted, powering front wheels, and this is where a tradition started. The problem with this layout is that the engine placement is very limited, as the motor is quite long and needs to leave space for axles going into the wheels. That means that the engine is either way back at the firewall with a gearbox at the front of the car like a Citroën Traction Avant, or far above the axles, which on the other hand would place the center of the gravity much higher, similar to old Saabs with the gearbox running underneath the engine oil pan. The last possible scenario is to push the engine forwards and the transmission and differential would be mounted right behind, towards the rear, similar to Subaru style. That's the way Audi chose to go, and this layout can be basically seen on any model with a longitudinally mounted engine. It started in an A4 and A6 predecessors. Models like the Audi S2, RS2 or the Sport Quattro had the engine so close to the bumper that a water radiator had to be beside it. There was even an Audi A8 D2 with a 3.7-liter V8, and considering it was front-wheel drive, without a question that's just too much weight over the front axle. The majority of drivers will never feel the engine placement, but a small percentage of people like us do recognize it very well. It doesn't really matter whether it is a small cast iron 1.8T hanging in Audi A4 or those massive V10 or double 12s in the most powerful large Audis. They sound amazing and are great in straight line performance, but when it comes to handling, the forum threads all mention the same: the numbness, heavy nose and understeer of an Audi. You can imagine it like having a shopping cart loaded at its front part only. It is heavy and tough to steer with it, and when it does, inertia is noticeable and the steering lacks precision. An old Audi S4 had as much as 62% of the weight over the front axle. Further development of the layout brought this ratio down to 55/45% in the latest B9 S4. While BMW is not known for similar behavior, their engines are far back and provide circa the 50-50 idle weight distribution, and they are rear-wheel drive, so portion of the weight is far back in the car. Of course, that's not the only thing that matters, but one of the major ones, yes. Fundamentally, the engine placement and the whole layout are simply not ideal in Audis. All that mass close to the front bumper is very noticeable, and it cannot disregard the laws of physics. However, there are some ways that Audi is also using to counteract. Applying a more sophisticated front suspension is most definitely a good way. Moreover, Audi fights with the understeer using their all-wheel drive system too. The permanent drive Quattro models drive a bit better, as part of the power is delivered through rear wheels and provides much better corner exits. Some of the older cars use an outdated style with a 50-50 power split, like an S4 or RS4 of the B5 generation, but new models starting with a 2007 Audi S4 feature a 40-60 power distribution. On the other hand, Logically, it should provide more grip and brake performance during hard decelerations. Regardless, Audi proved themselves that they can have the engine placed this bad and still outperform other manufacturers in racing. To mention a few, it was the Audi 90 Quattro IMSA and Audi 200 Quattro Trans Am which brought the company a couple of achievements. And not to forget the Audi Sport Quattro in its various versions, which prove the capability and competitiveness of Audi in a world championship level. And on snow roads, the Audi simply works.